The sun rose like a copper penny over Dust Creek, its light cutting through the morning haze that clung to the parched grasslands. Hester McCrae wiped her flour-dusted hands on her apron and stepped out of the kitchen door. Squinting against the brightness, the air already carried the promise of another scorching day. And it wasn't even past 6 o'clock. She'd been up since 4. As was her way, the Coulter ranch hands would be hungry soon, and hungry men made poor workers. Hester had learned long ago that a good breakfast could prevent more trouble than a loaded rifle, though she kept one of those handy too, propped behind the pantry door where she could reach it quick if needed. The kitchen was her domain, a sanctuary of cast iron and wood smoke where she ruled unchallenged. After 15 years of marriage to Dawson Pike, she'd earned this peace the hard way. The scars on her left arm, hidden beneath long sleeves even in summer, reminded her daily of what she'd escaped. Here at the Coulter Ranch, 30 miles from where Dawson still prowled the saloons of Cedar Ridge, she could breathe. "Coffee ready?" Jed Coulter's voice came from behind her, quiet as always. The man moved like a shadow despite his size. "Always is." Hester didn't turn around. She'd grown used to Jed's ways in the 2 years since he'd hired her. He was a man who kept his words spare and his promises good. "Biscuits'll be done in 10 minutes. Jed leaned against the doorframe, his weathered face showing the wear of a man who'd seen too much too young. At 34, he ran one of the most successful cattle operations in the territory, but success hadn't come without cost. Hester had heard the whispers about why he'd left Kansas, something about his younger brother and a land dispute that ended in blood. Whatever the truth, Jed wore his guilt like other men wore their gun belts, always present, never discussed. "Expecting company today," he said after a moment. "Scout from the mail road's coming through. Name's Talon." Hester's hand stilled on the coffee pot. "The one they talk about in town." "That's him." She'd heard the stories. Talon was what folks called a breed, part Cherokee, part Mexican, part nobody knew what else. The kind of man who could read sign better than most could read books. Who knew every waterhole between here and Santa Fe. The kind of man decent folks crossed the street to avoid, even while they depended on him to guide their mail and supplies through hostile territory. "He'll want feeding?" she asked, because that was always the practical question. "Reckon so. Man's been riding 3 days straight from Fort Sumner." Hester nodded and turned back to her stove. One more mouth to feed was nothing new. She'd learned to cook for crowds in her mother's boarding house back in Missouri, before she'd made the mistake of believing Dawson Pike's sweet promises, before she'd learned that some men's love came with fists attached. The morning progressed as mornings do on a working ranch. Cowboys stumbled in, wolfed down biscuits and salt pork, gulped coffee black as tar, and headed out to their work. Hester moved among them like a dancer, filling cups and plates with practiced efficiency. None of them tried to touch her anymore. Jed had made that clear early on, and those who'd tested the boundary had found themselves looking for work elsewhere. It was near noon when she saw the dust cloud approaching from the east. A single rider, moving steady but not rushed. Hester shaded her eyes with her hand and watched as the figure resolved into a man on a paint horse, both covered in the red dust that gave the territory its color. Talon was smaller than she'd expected, lean as a hungry wolf. He dismounted with an economy of movement that spoke of countless hours in the saddle. His face was all angles and shadows beneath a hat that had seen better decades, and his clothes were a practical mix of Mexican leather and American cloth. But it was his eyes that caught her attention, dark as coffee and twice as alert, taking in everything while revealing nothing. "Ma'am." He touched his hat brim, a gesture of respect that surprised her. His voice was soft, accented in ways that spoke of many languages mixing in one throat. "You'll be wanting food and water?" Hester said, falling back on the practical. "Well's around the side, kitchen's through here when you're ready." Talon studied her for a moment, and Hester had the uncomfortable feeling he was reading her like one of his trails. Then he nodded and led his horse away. Jed appeared from the barn, wiping his hands on a rag. The two men spoke in low voices by the well, their conversation too quiet for Hester to catch. She didn't try. Men's business was men's business, and she'd learned the hard way not to involve herself uninvited. 20 minutes later, Talon appeared at her kitchen door. He'd washed the worst of the trail dust from his face and hands, but the weariness clung to him like a second skin. "Sit," Hester said, pointing to the table. "Stew's hot." She served him without fuss beef and beans with cornbread, strong coffee, and a slice of the pie she'd been saving for supper. Talon ate with focused attention, like a man who knew meals were never guaranteed. "Been riding long?" she asked, more to fill the silence than from real curiosity. 3 days from Fort Sumner, like Jed said. 2 weeks before that from El Paso. That's a lot of ground? It's what they pay me for. He looked up from his plate, those dark eyes catching hers. "You're from Missouri." It wasn't a question. Hester's spine stiffened. "What makes you say that?" "The way you season your cornbread. Had a woman from Missouri cook for us once on a drive to Abilene. Same touch with the salt." She relaxed fractionally, left there 8 years back. "Good reasons, I expect." There was something in the way he said it, without judgment or prying, that made her look at him more carefully. This was a man who understood leaving places behind. The afternoon wore on. Talon finished his meal and thanked her with a formality that seemed both foreign and natural to him. He and Jed disappeared into the study to discuss whatever business had brought him here. Hester returned to her kitchen, kneading bread for tomorrow and trying not to think about how Talon's presence had shifted something in the air. It was near sunset when she heard the commotion. Horses arriving fast, voices raised in urgency. Hester grabbed the rifle from behind the pantry and moved to the window. 3 riders had thundered into the yard, their horses lathered with sweat. She recognized one Bill Haskins from the Dry Needle stage route. The other 2 were strangers, and one was slumped forward in his saddle, a dark stain spreading across his shirt. Talon was already moving, catching the wounded man as he started to fall. Jed shouted for the ranch hands, his voice carrying the authority that made men jump. "Bring them to the kitchen," Hester called out, already clearing the table. "Quick now!" They carried the wounded man in, laying him on the table she'd just wiped clean. Blood seeped through his shirt, a bullet wound, high on the shoulder. The second stranger, barely more than a boy, hovered nearby, his face pale beneath trail dust and fear. "Stage got hit at Dry Needle." Bill gasped out. Accepting the water, Hester thrust at him. "These 2 made it out, but there might be riders following." How many? Jed's voice was calm, but Hester saw his hand move to his sidearm. 6, maybe 7, after something these fellows were carrying. Hester didn't ask what. She was already cutting away the wounded man's shirt, assessing the damage. The bullet had passed through clean, missing the lung but leaving a mess of torn muscle. She'd seen worse. "Need hot water and clean cloth," she said, her hands moving with remembered skill. Her mother had been a healer of sorts, and Hester had learned at her knee before life took her down other paths. "And whiskey for cleaning." Talon appeared at her elbow with the supplies before she'd finished asking. Their hands brushed as he passed her the bottle, and Hester felt an unexpected jolt of something. She pushed it aside. This wasn't the time. As she worked, the boy finally found his voice. "Name's Eddie Marsh. This here's my uncle, Thomas. We're mail riders out of Fort Union." He swallowed hard. "They came out of nowhere, wanted our dispatch bag. Tom wouldn't give it up." "Brave or foolish," Jed muttered, but his tone held respect. "Both run in the family." Thomas managed through gritted teeth as Hester poured whiskey over his wound. The kitchen became a makeshift hospital, Hester working with steady hands while the men stood guard. Talon had disappeared outside standing watch. She assumed. The boy Eddie helped where he could, his hands shaking but willing. It was full dark by the time she'd finished. Thomas Marsh was bandaged and resting. The bleeding stopped and the wound clean. He'd live if fever didn't take him. Hester washed her hands in the basin. noting absently that blood was harder to get out from under fingernails than flour. "They can't stay here," one of the ranch hands said. "If those riders track them—" "They stay." Jed's voice brooked no argument. "We don't turn out wounded men." "But, boss—" "They stay." He looked around the room, meeting each man's eyes. "Anyone has a problem with that can collect their pay and ride out tonight." No one moved. Hester dried her hands slowly, watching this play out. She'd seen Jed face down difficult situations before, but this was different. There was something personal in his stance, some old debt being paid. Talon reappeared like smoke. "Riders coming, maybe 3 miles out, moving careful." The room erupted in controlled chaos. Men checked weapons, doused lights, took positions. Hester found herself pushed behind the heavy kitchen table, her rifle in hand. "You know how to use that?" Talon asked quietly, crouching beside her. "Well enough." He studied her in the dim light filtering through the shuttered window. Missouri women, always full of surprises. Despite everything, Hester felt her lips twitch. "You don't know the half of it." The weight stretched like taffy. Outside, the night sounds of the ranch continued, horses shifting in their stalls, a coyote calling in the distance. Inside, men breathed quietly and listened for hoofbeats. They came eventually, slow and careful. Jed had positioned the ranch hands well. From the kitchen window, Hester could see lanterns moving near the barn, searching. "Hello, the house!" The voice carried clearly in the still air. "We're looking for 2 men, male riders. Track them this way." Jed stepped onto the porch, silhouetted by the light from inside. "This is private property. Friend, state your business or move along." "Like I said, we're tracking 2 thieves. Stole something valuable from my employer." "Only thieves I see are the ones sneaking around my ranch in the dark." Jed replied evenly. "Suggest you head back the way you came." There was a long pause. Hester held her breath, finger resting on the trigger guard of her rifle. Beside her, Talon was still as stone. Finally, the voice came again. "This isn't over, Calter, Mr. Vale has a long memory." Silas Vale. Hester knew the name. Everyone in the territory did. Owned the biggest gambling house in Cedar Ridge, along with fingers in every dirty pie from here to Albuquerque. If he wanted something the mail riders carried, it wasn't good news. The riders retreated, their horses' hooves fading into the distance. Still, no one moved for long minutes after. "They'll be back," Talon said quietly, speaking to Jed but his eyes on Hester. "With more men and less talk." "I know." Jed holstered his pistol. "We'll be ready." Hester stood slowly, her knees protesting the time spent crouching. The kitchen that had been her sanctuary now felt exposed, vulnerable. She looked at the bloodstains on her table, at the wounded man breathing shallowly on the cot they'd set up near the stove, at the frightened boy trying to be brave. "What were they carrying?" she asked, surprising herself with the question. Eddie and Jed exchanged glances. Then the boy reached into his coat and pulled out an oilskin packet, no bigger than a man's hand. "Don't rightly know," he admitted. "Orders were to get it to the territorial governor. No stops, no questions." He hesitated. "Uncle Tom took a peek, though, before this happened." "And," Jed prompted. "Map," Thomas whispered from his cot, his voice thin but clear. "Shows water, underground stream from Quail Creek, enough to irrigate half the valley if a man knew how to tap it." The room went quiet as that sank in. Water was more precious than gold in this territory. Wars had been fought over less. Hester looked around the room at the faces of men who understood what this meant. Then she did what she always did when the world got too complicated. She put on coffee and started fixing a late supper. Whatever came next, it would be easier to face with full bellies. As she worked, she caught Talon watching her, something unreadable in those dark eyes. When their gazes met, he nodded slightly, as if acknowledging something. Whatever storm was coming to Dust Creek, she wouldn't face it alone. for the first time in years. That thought brought comfort instead of fear. The morning after the riders came, Dust Creek woke to an uneasy quiet. Word traveled fast in small towns. And by the time Hester walked to Elwood's general store for supplies, everyone knew about the trouble at Kelter Ranch. "Heard you had visitors last night," Martha Ellery said, not looking up from the bolts of calico she was examining. The widow ran the town's only lodging house and made it her business to know everyone else's. "News does travel," Hester replied carefully, selecting dried beans from a barrel. "Silas Vale's men, they're saying—" Martha's sharp eyes finally met hers. "That's a dangerous enemy to make, dear." Hester didn't respond, but her hands tightened on the cloth bag. She'd hoped to leave violent men behind when she fled from Dawson, but it seemed they had a way of finding her. Back at the ranch, she found Talon in the barn with Thomas Marsh's horse, checking its hooves with practiced care. The morning light slanted through the gaps in the boards, painting gold stripes across his back. "Horse picked up a stone," he said without looking up. "Been limping for miles, I'd guess." "Will it heal?" "With time and care." He straightened, wiping his hands on his pants. "Most things do." There was weight in those words that had nothing to do with horses. Hester found herself studying his profile, the strong line of his jaw, the way his hair fell across his forehead. She looked away quickly when he turned to face her. "Jed wants to move them," Talon continued. "The Marsh boys thinks they'd be safer elsewhere." "Where would they go? Thomas can barely sit up." "That's what I told him." A slight smile touched his lips. "Man's stubborn as a mountain goat when he wants to be." "Most men are—" The words came out more bitter than she intended. Talon's expression shifted, becoming carefully neutral. "Not all of us." Before Hester could respond, Eddie Marsh burst through the barn doors. "Riders coming, lots of them!" This time it wasn't a stealth approach. A dozen men rode straight up the main road, bold as brass in the morning sun. At their head was Silas Vale himself, dressed in a black suit despite the heat, his silver-headed cane across his saddle. Jed met them in the yard, flanked by his ranch hands. Talon melted into the shadows of the barn, but Hester saw him check his rifle. She stayed by the kitchen door, close enough to hear but ready to duck inside if shooting started. Mr. Kelter," Vale said, his voice smooth as oil. "I believe we have a misunderstanding to clear up." "No misunderstanding." Jed replied, "You sent men to my property at night. I sent them away. Simple as that." Vale's smile was thin as paper. "Those men were pursuing thieves, federal mail thieves, to be precise. Serious crime, that some might say anyone hiding such criminals would be complicit. Some might say a lot of things. Doesn't make them true." "Indeed." Vale shifted in his saddle, his pale eyes scanning the ranch. They lingered on Hester for a moment, and she fought the urge to shrink back. "I'm prepared to be reasonable. Kelter, the men I seek stole something that belongs to me. Return it, and we can forget this unpleasantness." "Nothing here belongs to you, Vale." "Ah, but that's where you're wrong." Vale pulled out a piece of paper. "This deed says I own the water rights to Quail Creek and all its tributaries. Bought it fair and square from the territorial office last month." Hester saw Jed's jaw tighten. Water rights were life and death in this country. If Vale controlled Quail Creek, he controlled the whole valley. "Funny how that deed appeared right after word got out about an underground stream," Jed said. "Fortunate timing." Vale agreed. "Now, about that map." "Don't know anything about any map." Vale sighed theatrically. "I had hoped to handle this as civilized men." He looked around at the armed ranch hands. "But I can see you prefer a more direct approach. Very well." He turned his horse, then paused. "Oh, and Kelter, I heard you've been harboring other fugitives as well." His eyes found Hester again. "A woman who abandoned her lawful husband. For instance, Dawson Pike is a friend of mine. He's very concerned about his wife's whereabouts." Ice formed in Hester's stomach. She gripped the door frame to keep from swaying. "Mrs. McCrae is employed here legally, Jed said, his voice hard. She's free to work where she chooses. Is she now? Vale's smile was predatory. We'll see about that. Good day, gentlemen, ladies. The riders departed in a cloud of dust, leaving behind a silence heavy with threat. He's bluffing, one of the hands said, about the water rights. Maybe, Jed allowed. But he's got the money to make it stick in court. Hester found her voice. What about the other thing? Jed turned to her, his expression gentling. Dawson Pike has no claim on you. Hester, you know that. Law might see it different. Her voice came out smaller than she intended. Man's got rights to his wife, they say. Not here, Jed said firmly. Not on my land. But Hester had lived too long with fear to be easily reassured. She retreated to her kitchen, hands shaking as she tried to focus on peeling potatoes for the noon meal. Talon found her there an hour later. He moved so quietly she didn't hear him until he spoke. You all right? Hester jumped, the knife slipping. A line of red appeared on her thumb. Here. Talon was beside her instantly. Taking her hand in his fingers were gentle as he examined the cut. Not deep. Hold still. He wrapped her thumb in a clean cloth from his pocket, his movements sure and careful. Hester found herself staring at his bent head, at the way the light caught the blue-black shine of his hair. Thank you, she managed when he finished. You're scared of him, your husband. It wasn't a question. Hester pulled her hand back, cradling it against her chest. He's not my husband anymore. But he still scares you. She turned away, busying herself with the potatoes. What do you know about it? I know fear when I see it. His voice was quiet. And I know what it's like to run from someone who thinks they own you. That made her look at him. Talon was leaning against the wall, arms crossed, his expression distant. My mother was Comanche, he said. Captured in a raid when she was young, sold to a Mexican rancher. She ran when she was 16, pregnant with me. Spent my whole childhood looking over our shoulders, waiting for someone to drag us back. Did they? Hester asked softly. They tried when I was 12. His jaw tightened. That's when I learned that sometimes running isn't enough. Sometimes you have to stand and fight. And if you're not strong enough to fight... Talon moved closer, his dark eyes intense. Strength isn't always about muscle. Hester, sometimes it's about choosing to trust the right people. Let them stand with you. The kitchen suddenly felt too small, too warm. Hester was acutely aware of how close he stood, of the way his presence seemed to fill the space. A commotion in the yard broke the moment. They both moved to the window to see Eddie Marsh arguing with Jed near the well. I should be riding for help, the boy was saying. The governor needs to know about the map, about Vale. You wouldn't make it 10 miles, Jed replied. Vale's got men watching every road out of the valley. Then what do we do? Just wait for him to come back with more guns? Hester and Talon exchanged glances, then headed outside. Other hands were gathering, drawn by the raised voices. We could make a copy, Thomas Marsh suggested weakly from where he sat propped against the wall. Still pale, but determined to be part of the discussion. Send out multiple riders in different directions. One might get through. With what? Jed asked. That map's full of surveyor's marks and calculations. Would take an expert to copy it right. I can do it. Everyone turned to look at Talon. My mother's people used to map water sources all through this territory. He explained. She taught me the symbols, how to read the land. I can make copies good enough to matter. Hope flickered in Eddie's young face. Then we could... No. The voice came from behind them. Bill Haskins stood in the barn doorway, and something in his expression made Hester's stomach clench. Wouldn't do no good now. What are you talking about? Jed demanded. Bill's weathered face was grim. Just came from town. Vale's called a meeting for tomorrow noon. Says he's got proof the Marsh boys stole that map from him in the first place. Got witnesses and everything. That's a lie, Eddie burst out. Course it is. Bill agreed. But he's also saying anyone caught helping them is guilty of receiving stolen property. Federal crime. He says prison time. The group fell silent as that sank in. Hester saw several of the hands exchange uneasy looks. These were good men, but they had families to think of. There's more, Bill continued reluctantly. Vale's put out word that he's willing to forget the whole thing if the map's returned by sundown today. Otherwise what? Jed's voice was steel. Otherwise he's sending to Cedar Ridge for the federal marshal. The one in his pocket. Bill spat in the dust. And he's wiring Dawson Pike that his wife's been located. The words hit Hester like a physical blow. She must have swayed because suddenly Talon's hand was on her elbow, steady and warm. Easy, he murmured. Breathe. I should go, she heard herself say, if I leave now. You're not going anywhere. Jed interrupted firmly. This is my fight now. But, no, his tone brooked no argument. I've run from one fight in my life. Cost my brother everything. I won't run again. The ranch hands shifted restlessly. Finally, one spoke up. What do you want us to do, boss? Jed looked around the circle of faces. Any man wants to leave. I'll pay out your wages now. No hard feelings. This isn't your fight. No one moved for a long moment. Then Sam Pritchard, the oldest hand, spat tobacco juice and said, Hell, boss. Been too quiet around here anyway. A ripple of grim laughter ran through the group, one by one. The men nodded their commitment. All right, then, Jed said. Let's get ready for company. Sam, I want lookouts posted. Bill, ride to the neighboring spreads. Quiet like. Tell them what's happening. Some might stand with us. As the men dispersed, Talon touched Hester's arm. Come on, I'll need help with those maps. She followed him into the house, grateful for something concrete to do. In Jed's study, Talon spread the precious map on the desk, weighing down the corners with books. Hold this steady, he instructed, producing paper and charcoal from somewhere. Hester watched as he worked, his hands moving with surprising delicacy. The map revealed itself to be more than just water sources. It showed depths, flow rates, soil types, information that could transform the valley from scrubland to farmland. No wonder Vale wants it, she murmured. Man like him doesn't want a farm, Talon replied, not looking up from his work. He wants control, make everyone pay for water, decide who prospers and who goes bust. You've known men like him before. Too many, he paused, glancing at her. Your husband, is he like Vale? Hester considered the question. No, Dawson's mean, but it's a small meanness. Personal. Vale's the kind who'd burn down the world for profit and sleep sound after. Talon nodded and returned to copying. They worked in companionable silence. Hester holding edges and passing supplies. She found herself studying his hands scarred but graceful. Strong but gentle. Hands that could break a horse or copy a delicate map with equal skill. There, he sat back, examining his work. Not perfect, but it'll do. What now? Now we make more copies. Hide them. Make sure that even if Vale gets the original, the information survives. As they worked, the afternoon shadows lengthened. Through the window, Hester could see armed men taking positions around the ranch. The waiting had begun. You should teach me, she said suddenly. Talon looked up. What? To read sign, track. She met his gaze steadily. I'm tired of running blind. Want to see trouble coming. Something shifted in his expression. That's not learning for a day. Then we'd better start. A slow smile curved his lips. All right. First lesson awareness, close your eyes. Hester hesitated, then obeyed. Now, his voice came soft and close. Tell me what you hear. She concentrated. Wind in the cottonwoods, horse in the corral, favoring its left front. That'll be Thomas's mount. Someone's hammering in the barn, probably Sam reinforcing the shutters. Coffee boiling over, oh. Her eyes flew open. My coffee. But Talon was already moving, lifting the pot from the fire with a folded cloth. Lesson 2, he said with that small smile. Always have a backup plan. Despite everything, Hester found herself almost smiling back. Then reality crashed back as she remembered what sunset would bring. We're really doing this, she said, standing against Vale. Seems so. Talon set the coffee pot on the trivet. Scared. Terrified. The admission came easier than expected. Good. Fear keeps you sharp. Just don't let it paralyze you. He moved closer, his voice dropping. And remember, you're not alone this time. The sunset deadline passed without Vale's return. But no one at Coulter Ranch slept easy that night. Hester found herself starting at every sound, her rifle propped within reach as she tried to rest on a cot in the kitchen. The main house had become a makeshift fortress, with the wounded Thomas Marsh in the parlor and guards posted at every window. Dawn brought dust clouds on the horizon, not Vale's men, but neighbors responding to Bill's call. Jack Tanner from the Box T arrived first, bringing 3 of his hands. Then came the widow Morrison with her 2 grown sons, and old Pete Sanchez from the small spread to the south. Ain't right. What Vale's doing, Jack said, accepting coffee from Hester. Man thinks money gives him the right to own everything. Time someone stood up to him? By mid-morning, they had nearly 20 extra men. Not an army, but enough to give Vale pause. Hester moved among them with coffee and food, listening to their talk. The mood was grim, but determined. You know he's wired for that marshal, Pete warned Jed. Ben Coltrane, man's meaner than a rattler and twice as poisonous. Let him come, Jed replied. We've done nothing wrong. Talon appeared at Hester's elbow as she refilled the coffee pot. Need to show you something, he said quietly. She followed him to the barn, where he'd been keeping watch. In the morning light, she could see new lines of fatigue around his eyes. Look, he pointed to marks in the dust near the fence. Someone was here last night, watching. Hester's skin prickled. Vale's men? Maybe, or... He hesitated, then seemed to decide something. There's another player in this game. Someone's been asking questions in town about the Marsh boys, about the map. Not Vale's people, different accent, different way of moving. Who? Don't know yet, but we need to be ready for surprises. He studied her face. How are you holding up? I've been better. She tried for a wry smile. Seems trouble has a way of finding me no matter where I run. Maybe you're looking at it wrong, Talon suggested. Maybe you're not running to trouble. Maybe you're running to where you're needed. Before Hester could puzzle out a response to that, Eddie Marsh came running. Riders coming, lots of them! This time, Vale had brought a small army. 30 men, maybe more, spread out in a line as they approached. At the center rode Vale himself, with a star-wearing man beside him who could only be Marshal Coltrane. But it was the rider on Vale's other side that made Hester's blood turn to ice. Dawson Pike sat his horse with the same swagger she remembered, his face showing the marks of hard living, but his eyes still mean as ever. Hello, wife, Dawson called out, his voice carrying across the yard. Been looking for you. Hester forced herself to step forward, though every instinct screamed at her to run. Not your wife anymore. Dawson, haven't been for 2 years. Funny, don't recall signing any divorce papers. His grin was ugly. Law says you're still mine. The lady says different, Jed interjected, moving to stand beside Hester. Marshal Coltrane urged his horse forward. Ben Coltrane, federal marshal. I'm here about stolen government property and the men who took it. Show him your warrant, Jack Tanner called out. If you got one. Coltrane's face darkened. Don't need a warrant to recover stolen property. You need one to search private property. Jed countered. This is still America, Marshal, or has Vale bought that too? Snickers ran through the assembled ranchers. Vale's face tightened with anger. Enough of this, he snapped. Marshal, These men are harboring criminals. Do your duty." But before Coltrane could respond, another voice rang out. "Perhaps we should discuss what constitutes criminal behavior. Mr. Vale." Everyone turned to see a woman riding up on a neat gray mare. She was dressed in traveling clothes, her bearing erect and official. Behind her rode two men who were clearly government agents. "Who the hell are you?" Vale demanded. "Margaret Standish, assistant to the territorial governor." She produced papers from her saddlebag. "I'm here to investigate reports of fraudulent land claims and water rights manipulation." The silence that followed was profound. Hester saw Vale's knuckles whiten on his cane. "Furthermore," Miss Standish continued, "I have here affidavits from the Federal Mail Service stating that Thomas and Edwin Marsh were carrying official territorial documents, not private property. Any claim that they stole from Mr. Vale is demonstrably false." "This is ridiculous," Vale sputtered. "Coltrane, arrest these men." But the marshal was looking uncertain now. Federal authority was one thing, but territorial government was another. And the two agents with Miss Standish looked very official indeed. "There's more," Miss Standish said. "Mr. Vale, you claim to have purchased water rights to Quail Creek, yet our records show that transaction was never properly recorded. In fact, it appears the documents were forged. You can't prove that." "Actually, I can." She produced another paper. "The territorial seal on your deed, it's from a stamp reported stolen 6 months ago. Rather sloppy work, really." Hester felt a bubble of hope rising in her chest. Around her, the tension in the yard shifted, like a tide turning. "As for you, Mr. Pike." Miss Standish turned her cool gaze on Dawson. "I understand you're here claiming marital rights. Do you have documentation of your marriage?" "Don't need papers," Dawson blustered. "Everyone knows Hester's my wife." "Actually, you do need papers. And according to territorial law, abandonment for more than 1 year constitutes grounds for dissolution of marriage. Mrs. McCrae has been employed here for 2 years. Correct." "That's right," Jed confirmed. "Then Mr. Pike has no legal claim." Miss Standish's tone was final. Dawson's face went purple. "You can't, she's mine, "You'll do nothing," Talon said quietly. He'd moved without anyone noticing, positioning himself between Dawson and Hester. The ladies made her choice clear. "You half-breed son of a—" Dawson reached for his gun, but Talon was faster. Not to draw, he simply stepped forward and caught Dawson's wrist, twisting just enough to make the man yelp and drop his weapon. "That's assault," Vale shouted. "Marshal, arrest him." But Coltrane was backing his horse away. "I'm not getting in the middle of this mess. You want to file charges? Do it through proper channels." "You coward." Vale's composure finally cracked. "I own you." "No, sir," Coltrane replied coldly. "You pay me. There's a difference. And right now, what you're paying ain't worth taking on the territorial government." With that, the marshal wheeled his horse and rode off, taking several of Vale's hired guns with him. The odds in the yard shifted dramatically. Vale looked around, calculating. Then his shoulders slumped slightly. "This isn't over," he said to no one in particular. "Not by a long shot." "Actually, it is," Miss Standish said. "Mr. Vale, you're under arrest for forgery, fraud, and conspiracy to steal government documents. These gentlemen will escort you to Cedar Ridge for trial." The two agents moved forward. Vale didn't resist, but his eyes burned with fury as they bound his hands. "And me?" Dawson asked, his voice smaller now. Miss Standish considered him. "Have you committed any crimes in this territory, Mr. Pike?" "He's disturbed the peace," Jed suggested. "Threatened folks. Attempted to draw a weapon. 30 days in jail should cover that," Miss Standish agreed. "Unless you'd prefer to leave the territory entirely." Dawson looked around the yard at the armed ranchers. At Talon, still standing ready. At Hester, protected by her friends. His shoulders sagged. "I'll go," he muttered. "Ain't nothing for me here anyway." As the agents led the prisoners away, Hester found herself shaking, not with fear this time, but with something like disbelief. It was over, just like that. It was over. "Not quite what I expected," Jed said to Miss Standish. "Grateful you showed up when you did." The woman smiled. "Thank Mr. Marsh's partner back at Fort Union. When Thomas didn't report in, he wired the governor directly. We've been watching Vale for months, looking for proof. This gave us what we needed." She turned to Thomas, who was leaning on Eddie but looking much better. "The map you carried is safe." "Yes, ma'am," Eddie said, producing the original. "Though we made copies, just in case." "Smart boys." She tucked the map into her saddlebag. "The governor will want to ensure this information is used properly. Public water for public good, not private profit." As the official party prepared to leave, Miss Standish paused beside Hester. "Mrs. McCrae, or do you prefer your maiden name?" "McCrae is fine," Hester said. She'd stopped being a pike the day she ran. "Well, Mrs. McCrae, if you ever need documentation of your marital status clarified, wire my office. We'll ensure the paperwork reflects reality." "Thank you," Hester managed through a tight throat. After they left, taking Vale and Dawson with them, the yard slowly emptied. Neighbors shook hands, clapped backs, promised to gather soon under better circumstances. The Marsh boys made arrangements to continue their journey once Thomas was fully healed. As the sun set, Hester found herself back in her kitchen, mechanically preparing supper. The familiar actions helped ground her in this new reality where she wasn't looking over her shoulder anymore. "You all right?" Talon asked from the doorway. She considered the question. "I think so. It's strange, not being afraid." He came closer, leaning against her work table. "Fear's a habit, takes time to break." Speaking from experience. Maybe. He watched her knead bread dough. "What will you do now without the fear? I mean..." Hester paused in her work. She'd been running so long. She'd never thought about what she'd do if she could stop. "I don't know," she admitted. "Stay here, I suppose. It's a good job. Safe." "Safe," he repeated, something unreadable in his tone. "That what you want, just safe?" She looked at him then. Really looked. Saw the question in his eyes that he wasn't quite asking. "I used to think so," she said slowly. "Now, maybe I want more than just safe. Maybe I want to live instead of just survive." A smile tugged at his lips. "That's a start." Jed appeared in the doorway, breaking the moment. "Hester, Talon, we need to talk about what comes next." They followed him to the study, where he poured whiskey for all three. "Vale's gone, but his operation isn't." Jed began. "Someone'll need to step up. Help organize the water rights proper. Make sure folks get fair access." "Are you thinking of taking that on?" Talon asked. "I'm thinking we all might." Jed looked between them. "This valley needs good people working together. Question is, are you staying?" The question was directed at Talon, but Hester found herself holding her breath for the answer. Talon was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Might be time to stop wandering. See what staying in one place feels like." "And you, Hester?" Jed asked. "I know you've got no reason to run now, but you've got no obligation to stay either. You could go anywhere." Hester thought about that. It was true for the first time in years. She was truly free. She could go back to Missouri, start fresh somewhere new, become anyone she wanted. But when she looked around this room, at these two men who'd stood by her, who'd risked everything for what was right, she knew her answer. "I've done enough running," she said. "Think I'll see what standing still feels like, too." Jed raised his glass. To standing still, then, and standing together. They drank, and Hester felt something settle in her chest. Not just safety, but belonging. Not just survival, but the possibility of something more. Outside, night was falling over Dust Creek, but for the first time in longer than she could remember. Hester wasn't afraid of what tomorrow might bring. The weeks following Vale's arrest brought changes to Dust Creek. With the water rights settled fairly, ranchers who'd been struggling began to prosper. The town itself seemed to breathe easier, like a horse finally freed from an ill-fitting saddle. But not everyone was pleased with the new order of things. Hester first noticed the tension on a supply run to town. Whispers followed her through Elwood's store, and not the usual curious gossip. These had an edge, sharp as a skinning knife. "Some folks don't know their place," she heard Henrietta Paulson mutter to her companion. "Getting above themselves. If you ask me." The words stung, but Hester had endured worse. She completed her purchases with her chin high, refusing to show how the comments affected her. It wasn't until she was loading the wagon that Martha Ellery approached. "Pay them no mind, dear," the widow said, though her usual sharp manner was softened with concern. "Small people hate seeing others rise." "I haven't risen anywhere," Hester protested. "I'm still just a cook." Martha's keen eyes studied her. "Are you now? Word is Jed Calter's been relying on you for more than biscuits these days, and that scout of his seems mighty attentive." Heat crept up Hester's neck. "Talon's teaching me tracking, that's all. Useful skills for anyone in this country." Martha's tone was knowing. "Well, you be careful. Vale had friends, and they're not happy about how things turned out. That husband of yours might be gone, but he left debts behind." "What kind of debts?" "The kind that other people might try to collect." Martha patted her arm. "Just watch yourself, dear." The warning echoed in Hester's mind as she drove back to the ranch. She found Talon in the corral, working with a new horse. He moved with the fluid grace she'd come to associate with him, speaking low to the animal until it stood quiet under his touch. "Martha says Vale's people are stirring up trouble," she said without preamble. Talon didn't look surprised. "Been expecting it. Men like Vale don't work alone. Someone was backing his play. And they won't be happy about losing their investment." "Who?" "Don't know yet." He led the horse to the fence, his movements careful and deliberate. "But I've been watching. Strangers in town, asking questions. Mail service has had 2 more attempted robberies this week." "The map." "Maybe. Or maybe someone's trying to destabilize things, make folks wish for the old days when Vale kept order." He finally looked at her, his dark eyes serious. "Might be time for that lesson in watching for danger I promised you." They spent the afternoon in the hills above the ranch. Talon taught her to read the land like a book, how bent grass told stories, how disturbed stones revealed passages, how birds and insects could signal human presence. "Your eyes want to see everything at once," he explained, adjusting her position behind a boulder. "Don't let them. Pick sections. Scan slowly. Movement catches attention better than shapes." Hester tried to follow his instructions, fighting the urge to constantly check over her shoulder. Being this far from the ranch made her nervous, even with Talon beside her. "There," she said suddenly. "Rider, coming from the east." "Good eye. Who is it?" She squinted, trying to make out details through the heat shimmer. "Can't tell, but he's riding hard." They watched the rider approach the ranch at a gallop, even from a distance. Hester could see something was wrong. The man swayed in his saddle, barely staying mounted. "Come on." Talon was already moving, swift and sure down the hillside. They reached the ranch as the rider collapsed into Sam Pritchard's arms. It was Jake Morrison, one of the widow's sons. "Trouble at our place?" Jake gasped out. "Men came, said Mom owed them money, said they were collecting for Dawson Pike." Ice filled Hester's veins. "Dawson's gone. He agreed to leave." "These men don't care about agreements." Jake accepted water gratefully. "They're tearing up the house, looking for something. Tom's trying to hold them off. But there's 4 of them." Jed was already shouting orders, gathering men. "Sam, You and 3 others with me. Talon." "I'm going," Hester interrupted. Both men turned to stare at her. "This is my fault," she continued, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. "Dawson's debts, whatever they are, I won't hide while others pay for my troubles." "Hester," Jed began. "I can handle a rifle, and I know Dawson's ways. Might know what they're looking for." She met Talon's eyes. "You said I needed to stop running." Something passed between them. An understanding. Talon nodded slowly. "She rides with me," he told Jed. "I'll keep her safe." The ride to the Morrison Ranch was the longest of Hester's life. Every pound of the horse's hooves seemed to echo her heartbeat. What debts had Dawson left? What was her connection to them? They heard the trouble before they saw its shouts. Breaking glass, a woman's scream. Jed held up a hand, signaling for quiet approach. 2 at the house, 2 in the barn," Talon reported after a quick scout. "Mrs. Morrison and Tom are in the house. Looks like they're barricaded in the back room." "We split up," Jed decided. "Sam, take your men to the barn. Talon, Hester, with me to the house." They moved like shadows, years of working together evident in their coordination. Hester found herself between Talon and Jed, protected but not excluded. The front door hung askew on its hinges. Inside, furniture lay overturned, drawers emptied onto the floor. 2 men were trying to break down an interior door, cursing at the resistance they met. "That's enough," Jed announced. Rifle steady. The men spun, hands going for weapons, but found themselves covered from 3 angles. "Drop them," Talon ordered, his voice carrying quiet menace. They complied, faces sullen. One of them, a scarred man with pale eyes, smirked at Hester. Well, the runaway wife. Pike said you'd turn up if we squeezed the right people." "Dawson's gone," Hester said. "Whatever scheme this is, it's over." "Gone but not forgotten." The scarred man's grin widened. "See, your husband owed money, a lot of money, and he had something valuable to trade, only he never delivered." "What are you talking about?" "Information about certain documents that might be passing through this territory. Government papers worth a fortune to the right buyers." Understanding dawned cold and horrible. "The map. Dawson knew about the map." "Smart girl. Pike was supposed to get it for us, but then he goes and gets himself arrested. Very inconvenient." The man's eyes glittered. "But he said you'd know where it went. Said you always poked your nose into everything." "I don't have it. The government took it." "All of it, every copy?" He shook his head. "Pike swore copies were made, hidden, and we mean to have them." From the barn came sounds of struggle, then Sam's voice calling all clear. The scarred man's confidence faltered slightly. "You're outnumbered." Jed pointed out, "Best surrender now. Save yourself worse trouble." But the man just laughed. "You think we're the only ones? There's a dozen more where we came from. And they'll keep coming until we get what we're owed." "Then they'll be disappointed," a new voice said from the doorway. Sheriff Cole stood there, looking older and tired, but wearing his badge with new authority. Behind him were several deputies. "Got your message, Coulter," the sheriff continued. "These men are wanted for robbery and assault in 3 counties. Be my pleasure to arrest them." As the deputies secured the prisoners, Mrs. Morrison and Tom emerged from their barricade. The widow was shaken but unharmed, her stern face showing relief at the sight of help. "They came in like they owned the place," she said, accepting Hester's supporting arm. "Kept demanding money I don't have, papers I've never seen." "It's my fault," Hester said miserably. "Dawson's debts." "Are Dawson's debts?" "Mrs." Morrison interrupted firmly. "Not yours. You don't answer for that man's crimes." But guilt sat heavy on Hester's shoulders as they helped clean up the damage. These people had suffered because of her connections, her past that wouldn't stay buried. She was sweeping broken glass when Talon found her. "Stop," he said quietly. Stop what? Blaming yourself. I can see it in every line of your body. He took the broom from her hands. This isn't your doing. Isn't it they came here because of me? Because of Dawson? They came here because they're criminals looking for easy money. His hands settled on her shoulders, warm and steady. You don't control other people's choices. Hester, only your own. She looked up at him, seeing understanding in his dark eyes. He knew about carrying guilt, about the weight of unearned responsibility. The scarred one said there were more coming. She said, "Let them come." His jaw set with determination. "We'll be ready." Back at the Coulter Ranch that evening, a council of war convened. Jed, Talon, Sheriff Cole, and several neighboring ranchers gathered around the dining table Hester had covered with coffee and food. "We need those copies of the map," the sheriff said bluntly. "Long as they're out there. They're bait for every criminal in the territory." "They're hidden," Jed assured him. "Safe. Safe isn't enough. We need to get them to the governor. Let the government secure them proper." "That means traveling through hostile territory," Jack Tanner pointed out. "These men know the mail routes now. They'll be watching. Then we don't use the mail routes." Talon suggested, "I know ways through the mountains. Old paths my mother's people used. Harder riding, but safer." "You'd need a small group," the sheriff mused. "Too many riders attract attention." I'll go," Jed said immediately. "And me," Hester added. Everyone turned to look at her. "You've done enough, Hester," Jed said gently. "This isn't your fight." "That's where you're wrong." She stood, facing the room of men. "They're using me to get to all of you, using my past, my connections. Well, I'm done being used. I'm done letting my past hurt good people." "Hester," Talon started. "No." She cut him off. "You taught me to track, to watch, to be aware. Now let me use those skills. I know Dawson, know how he thinks. If his creditors are following his playbook, I might see things others miss." Silence stretched. Then Martha Ellery spoke from the doorway where she'd been listening. "The girl's got a point. Sometimes the best person to spot a snake is someone who's been bitten before." Sheriff Cole nodded slowly. "All right, but we do this smart. Small group, like we said. Jed, Talon, Hester. I'll send 2 deputies as backup. You leave at first light before anyone expects it." As the meeting broke up, Hester found herself on the porch, needing air. The night was clear, stars spreading like spilled salt across the sky. She heard Talon approach but didn't turn. "You sure about this?" he asked. "No." The admission came easily. "But I'm tired of being sure, tired of being safe and scared. Maybe it's time to be unsure and brave instead." He moved to stand beside her, close enough that she could feel his warmth in the cool night air. "For what it's worth," he said, "I think you're one of the bravest people I've known. Takes a different kind of courage to survive what you have and still choose to help others." Hester felt tears prick her eyes. "I don't feel brave." "Brave people rarely do." His hand found hers in the darkness, a gentle touch that asked nothing, offered everything. "But I'll tell you a secret, courage is easier when you're not alone." She turned her hand, lacing their fingers together. It was such a simple gesture, yet it felt like stepping off a cliff. Trust was still new to her, still frightening. But as they stood there under the vast western sky, hands linked and dangers gathering, Hester thought that maybe frightening things were worth doing. Maybe that's what living really meant, not the absence of fear, but moving forward despite it. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, men hunting for maps and money, dangerous trails through hostile country, the weight of protecting what the valley needed to prosper. But tonight, she had a moment of peace, a hand to hold, and the knowledge that she wasn't facing her battles alone anymore. It wasn't safety, but maybe it was something better. Maybe it was hope. They'd been riding for 2 days through the mountain passes when the storm hit, not rain dust. a wall of red-brown earth that turned day to twilight and made breathing feel like swallowing sand. "Into the rocks," Talon shouted over the howling wind, pointing to an outcropping that promised shelter. Hester pulled her bandana over her nose and followed, trusting his lead even when she could barely see her horse's ears. The two deputies, Collins and Reed, struggled behind them while Jed brought up the rear, making sure no one fell behind. The overhang Talon found was deep enough to shelter both people and horses. They huddled together, waiting for the worst to pass, listening to the wind scream like a living thing outside their refuge. "Well," Deputy Collins said, spitting dust, "this is cozy." Despite everything, Hester found herself almost smiling. She was trail-worn, dust-covered, and half-blind from grit. But something had shifted in her over the past 2 days. The fear that had been her constant companion for years was still there, but smaller somehow, manageable. "How long will it last?" she asked Talon. "Hour, maybe 2. He was already checking the horses, running gentle hands over their legs and sides. "We were lucky to find shelter." "Luck nothing," Jed said. "You knew exactly where this overhang was." Talon shrugged. "My mother taught me to always know 3 ways out of any situation, shelter spots included." As they waited, Hester found herself studying her companions. Deputy Reed was young, maybe 20, trying to look older with a struggled mustache. Collins was the opposite, grizzled and steady, the kind of man who'd seen too much to be easily rattled. And Jed. The rancher sat apart slightly, that distant look in his eyes that appeared whenever he thought no one was watching. "Penny for them," she said quietly, moving to sit beside him. Jed glanced at her, surprised. "Just thinking about the last time I made this kind of run. Different mountains, different reason." "Your brother?" He nodded slowly. "Tom was always the brave one. Said we couldn't let the big ranchers push us off our land. I said we should be smart, wait for the law." His laugh was bitter. "Turns out the law was bought and paid for. By the time I decided to fight, it was too late." "You were young," Hester offered. "Old enough to know better? Old enough to stand with him instead of trying to play it safe?" He looked at her directly. "That's why I couldn't let Vale win. Couldn't make the same mistake twice." Hester understood. The weight of past failures. The desperate need to make different choices. We all have our ghosts. Jed. Some louder than others. His eyes drifted to where Talon was showing Reed how to calm a nervous horse. "He's good for you, you know." Heat crept up her neck. "I don't know what you mean." "Sure you do." Jed's smile was knowing but kind. "Man looks at you like you hung the moon. And you're different around him, stronger." "I'm not ready." "Who said anything about ready?" Jed interrupted gently. "Sometimes life doesn't wait for ready. Sometimes you just have to jump and trust someone will catch you." Before Hester could respond, Talon called out, "Wind's dying. We should move while we can." They emerged from shelter to find the world transformed. The storm had scoured the landscape, leaving everything sharp-edged and strange, but the air was clearer, and they could see for miles. "There," Talon pointed to marks in the freshly disturbed earth. "Riders passed this way, maybe an hour before the storm." "And how many?" Collins asked. "Suddenly all business." 6, maybe 7. Talon dismounted to study the tracks more closely. "Moving fast, heading for Widow's Peak." "That's on our route," Reed said nervously. "It's the only water for 10 miles. Jed explained. "Everyone going through these mountains stops there. Then we go around," Hester suggested. But Talon was shaking his head. "Can't. Horses need water, and the next source is 2 days out of our way. We'd never make it. So we go through them," Collins said grimly. "Or we wait." Talon countered, "Let them move on." "What if they're waiting for us?" Hester asked. The question hung heavy in the dust-laden air. They decided to scout first. Talon and Hester went on foot, leaving the others with the horses. It was Hester's first real test of the tracking skills he'd taught her, and she found herself hyper-aware of every broken twig, every displaced stone. "Slow down," Talon murmured. "You're trying too hard. Let your eyes relax. Take in the whole picture." She tried, and suddenly things snapped into focus, a pattern in the disturbances, a story written in dirt and stone. "They stopped here," she said. "One dismounted, see the boot print deeper on the left. He favors that leg." "Good," Talon approved. "What else?" She studied the scene. They were arguing. Horses milled around instead of staying in line. And someone threw something. There, caught in the sage. It was a playing card, torn in half. The Queen of Hearts. "Gamblers," Talon said. "Probably Vale's old crowd." They crept closer to Widow's Peak, staying low among the rocks. The spring was in a natural bowl, surrounded by cottonwoods and boulders, perfect for an ambush. And that's exactly what they found. 7 men lounged around the spring, weapons close at hand. Their horses were hobbled nearby, and Hester could see they'd positioned themselves to watch all approaches. Anyone coming for water would be spotted immediately. "Professionals," Talon breathed. Not random thugs. One of the men stood out tall and lean, with silver threading through his dark hair. He moved with an economy that reminded Hester of Talon, all deadly grace. When he turned, she saw a scar running from eye to jaw. "Cesar Molina," Talon said, and there was something in his voice she'd never heard before. Fear, respect, both. "You know him?" "Everyone in my line of work knows him. Best tracker between here and Mexico City. If Vale hired him..." He trailed off, but Hester could finish the thought. If Vale hired him, their mountain paths weren't as secret as they'd hoped. They retreated carefully, returning to the others with the bad news. "Molina." Collins whistled low. "Heard he tracked a man through a blizzard once. Found him holed up in a cave everyone swore was empty. So we can't go around him." Jed summarized. "Can't wait him out, and can't fight through ideas." "We could try talking," Reed suggested, hopefully. Everyone looked at him. "Or not," he mumbled. "Actually," Hester said slowly, "he might have something." She looked at Talon. "You said Molina's a professional. Men like that, they work for money, not causes. What if we offered him a better deal?" "With what?" Collins asked. "We're not carrying gold." "No, but we know something he doesn't." Hester took a breath. "We know where all the copies of the map are hidden." The silence that followed was profound. Finally, Jed spoke. "You're suggesting we trade information for passage?" "I'm suggesting we bluff," Hester corrected. "Make him think we might deal, get close enough to, I don't know, something." "It's suicide," Collins stated flatly. "Maybe," Hester agreed. "But doing nothing is guaranteed failure. At least this gives us a chance." "I'll go," Talon said immediately. "Molina knows me by reputation. He might listen." "We go together," Hester interrupted. "A tracker and a woman aren't threatening. Might make him curious instead of suspicious." "Absolutely not," both Jed and Talon said simultaneously. "You have a better plan." She looked between them. "Because I'm listening." They didn't. In the end, it was decided. Hester and Talon would approach under a white flag, or in this case, Hester's least dusty petticoat tied to a rifle barrel. The others would position themselves in the rocks, ready to provide cover if things went bad. As they prepared, Talon pulled Hester aside. "You don't have to do this." "Yes, I do." She checked her hidden derringer, a gift from Martha before they left. "I'm tired of being the victim in my own story. Talon, time to be something else." He studied her for a long moment. Then, surprising her, he reached up and unpinned something from inside his coat. It was a small silver charm, worn smooth with handling. "My mother's," he said, fastening it to her collar. "For protection." Talon, just be careful. His hands lingered on her shoulders. I've gotten used to having you around. The moment stretched between them, full of unspoken words. Then Hester did something that surprised them both. She rose on her toes and kissed his cheek, quick and light. For luck, she said, then turned away before she could see his reaction. They approached Widow's Peak as the sun sank low, painting the rocks in shades of blood and gold. The white flag went first, Hester holding it high while Talon walked beside her, hands visible but ready. The sentries spotted them immediately. Rifles swung their way, but no one fired, yet. That's close enough. Someone called. They stopped 20 yards from the spring, close enough to talk, too far to rush. Hester's heart hammered, but her hands were steady on the flagpole. I need to speak with Cesar Molina. Talon called out. Tell him the Comanche tracker wants to make a deal. Movement among the men. Then the scarred man stepped forward, and Hester understood Talon's wariness. This was a predator in human form, all coiled violence and cold assessment. Little Wolf, Molina said, using what must have been Talon's reputation name. Heard you'd gone soft, working for ranchers. Man's gotta eat, Talon replied evenly. True. Molina's eyes shifted to Hester. And who's this? Someone with information you want, Hester said, proud when her voice didn't shake. About the water rights map, all the copies. Interest flickered in Molina's dark eyes. Keep talking. Not here, Hester said. Too many ears, just you and us. You think I'm stupid, woman. I think you're practical, she countered. Vale's in prison. Whatever he was paying you is gone, but there are others who'd pay well for those maps. Question is, do you want to spend days searching for something that might not exist, or would you rather have someone hand you the information? Molina considered this. Then he smiled, and it was worse than a scowl. You've got spine. I'll give you that. All right, we talk, but any tricks? No tricks, Talon assured him. Molina gestured them forward. Hester felt the weight of watching eyes as they approached. Her skin crawled with the need to run, but she kept walking. Up close, Molina was even more intimidating, but there was intelligence in his eyes, not just brutality. So, he said, talk. Hester's mind raced. The bluff had gotten them close, but now what? She could feel Talon tense beside her, ready for whatever desperate play she made. Then she noticed something. One of Molina's men near the spring, his stance was wrong, too stiff, hand pressed to his side. And was that blood on his shirt? Your man's hurt, she said suddenly. Molina's eyes narrowed. So infection kills more men out here than bullets. She met his gaze steadily. I've got medical supplies, knowledge. Maybe we can trade for more than just information. You a doctor? I'm someone who's kept men alive in hard country. Sometimes that's better than a doctor. She saw the calculation in Molina's eyes. Pride warring with practicality. Then he jerked his head toward the wounded man. Show me. Hester approached slowly, aware of the guns tracking her movement. The wounded man-boy, really, probably younger than Deputy Reed, was pale and sweating. A knife wound in his side, crudely bandaged and already showing signs of infection. This needs cleaning, she said. Proper bandaging. I've got carbolic acid in my kit. Get it, Molina ordered. It's with our horses. Let my partner fetch it. She looked up at the tracker. Unless you'd rather lose a man to pride? Long seconds passed. Then Molina nodded to Talon. Go, try anything. He won't, Hester said firmly. As Talon left, she turned back to the wounded boy. What's your name? Luis, he mumbled. Well, Luis, this is going to hurt, but not as much as dying. She looked at the other men. I need clean water, hot if you can manage it. What followed was surreal. Hester working on the wounded boy while surrounded by armed men who'd been hunting them. The sun sank lower, painting everything in deep reds and purples. Talon returned with the medical supplies, and she knew he'd have told the others to wait, to watch for opportunities. As she cleaned and stitched Luis's wound, she became aware of Molina watching her closely. "You've done this before," he observed. "Too many times." She tied off the bandage. "He should live, if he keeps it clean and rests." In return, this was the moment. The bluff called, the cards on the table. Hester made a decision that would have terrified her weeks ago. "In return, you let us pass, water our horses, and go." Molina's expression darkened. "That's all. What about the maps?" "What about them?" She met his gaze calmly. "Vale's finished. The government has the original. Whatever copies exist will surface eventually. Or they won't. Either way, the big prize is gone." "You were lying." "I was negotiating." She stood, very aware of how many guns were pointed at her. "But I wasn't lying about being tired of running. So here's the truth. We're taking those maps to the governor. You can try to stop us, probably succeed, but you'll lose men doing it. Or you can let us go, keep your men whole, and find easier prey." The silence stretched taut. Hester could feel Talon coiled beside her, ready to move. In the rocks, their friends waited for disaster. Then Molina laughed. Actually laughed, low and genuinely amused. "You've got sand, woman, more than most men." He looked at Talon. "She yours?" "She's her own," Talon replied carefully. "I just try to keep up." "Smart man." Molina made a gesture, and weapons lowered around the spring. "Water your horses. Rest if you need. But be gone by dawn." Hester's knees nearly buckled with relief, but she kept her spine straight. "Thank you." "Don't thank me," Molina said. "Just remember I gave you this gift. Someday, I might need one in return." It was a promise and a threat rolled into one, but it was also survival, and Hester would take it. An hour later, as their group prepared to leave Widow's Peak, Talon pulled her aside. They stood in the shadow of a large boulder, the first stars appearing overhead. The tension of the day was fading, leaving behind something else, a trembling awareness of what they'd just survived. "That was incredibly brave," he said softly. "Also incredibly foolish. Seems to be my new approach to life." Her attempt at lightness failed when her voice shook. "Hey!" He stepped closer, hands gentle on her arms. "You're safe. We're safe." The trembling hit her then, delayed reaction to the danger. Talon pulled her against him, and she let herself lean into his strength. He was warm and solid, smelling of leather and sage and something uniquely him. "I was terrified," she admitted against his chest. "So was I." His arms tightened around her. "When Molina was looking at you like that, I've never been so scared in my life." She pulled back enough to see his face. "Really? Really?" His hand came up to cup her cheek, thumb brushing away a tear she hadn't known was there. "Hester, We should go." Jed's voice interrupted gently. "Make some distance while we can." The moment broken, they stepped apart. But something had shifted between them. Some wall had fallen. As they mounted up and rode into the gathering dark, Hester found herself thinking about what Jed had said about jumping and trusting someone to catch you. She glanced at Talon riding beside her, steady and sure, even in uncertain light. Maybe she wasn't ready. Maybe she'd never be ready, not after everything she'd been through. But maybe ready was overrated. Maybe the best things in life happened when you were scared and did them anyway. The mountains rose around them, dark and full of unknown dangers. But Hester McCrae, who'd once run from her own shadow, rode through them with her head high. She'd faced down one of the most dangerous men in the territory and lived. She'd saved a life and negotiated their freedom. And somewhere in the midst of fear and courage, she'd remembered what it felt like to hope. As if sensing her thoughts, Talon caught her eye and smiled that small, private smile she'd come to treasure. "What happens now?" she asked. echoing a question that seemed to define their journey. His smile widened. Anything you want. This time, she believed him. They reached the territorial capital just as dawn painted the sky pearl gray. Fort Union sprawled before them, a mix of military precision and frontier chaos. Soldiers drilled in the parade ground while merchants hawked wares from wagons, and the smell of bacon and gunpowder mingled in the morning air. Never thought I'd be glad to see civilization, Deputy Reed muttered, shifting stiffly in his saddle. Hester knew how he felt. 5 days in the mountains had left them all trail-worn and jumpy. Even now, safely within sight of federal authority, she caught herself checking their back trail. Governor Territorial Judge Samuel Pemberton received them within an hour, a testament to the importance of their cargo. He was a small, neat man with shrewd eyes behind wire spectacles, the kind who looked soft until you noticed the steel underneath. Mr. Coulter, I understand you've had quite the journey." Pemberton accepted the oilskin packet containing the map copies with careful hands. "Miss Standish's report mentioned complications." "Nothing we couldn't handle," Jed replied, though Hester noticed he didn't elaborate on just how close some of those complications had come. The governor studied the maps while they stood awkwardly in his plush office. Hester felt acutely aware of her trail dust and worn clothes among the polished furniture and thick carpets. "These are excellent copies," Pemberton finally said. "Who made them?" "I did," Talon answered, stepping forward slightly. The governor's eyes sharpened with interest. "You have surveying experience." "My mother's people mapped water sources throughout this territory for generations. I learned their methods." "Interesting." Pemberton set the maps aside carefully. "We'll need testimony about Vale's attempted theft, of course. And there's the matter of the continuing threats to the water rights." "That's why we're here," Jed said. "Yes, but it's not enough." The governor moved to a map on his wall, showing the entire territory. Vale was a symptom, not the disease. There are forces back east, railroad money mostly, that want to control every drop of water between here and California. They'll try again. "Then what do we do?" Hester surprised herself by speaking up. Pemberton turned to her with calculating eyes. "We make it impossible for them to succeed. Public record, public hearings, and most importantly, public use. I'm proposing to establish a territorial water commission, with representatives from each affected community." "Run by who?" Jed asked suspiciously. "By the people who need it most. Ranchers, farmers, townspeople." The governor paused. "I'll need commissioners, people with proven integrity who understand both the land and the law." Hester saw where this was going before Jed did. Sure enough, Pemberton's next words confirmed it. "Mr. Coulter, I'd like you to consider serving as commissioner for the Dust Creek region." Jed's expression went carefully blank. "I'm no politician." "Exactly why you'd be good at it." Pemberton smiled slightly. "Think about it. In the meantime, I'll need detailed depositions from all of you. My secretary will arrange accommodation at the Territorial Hotel." They were dismissed with promises to reconvene that afternoon. As they stepped into the bustling street, Hester felt disoriented. After the isolation of the trail, the press of people made her skin crawl. "You all right?" Talon's voice came low beside her. It's a lot of people." "Come on." He touched her elbow lightly. "I know a quieter way to the hotel." He guided her through side streets, away from the main thoroughfare. The others followed, respecting her need for space. It was such a small gesture, but it meant everything. Talon had learned to read her as well as he read trail sign. The Territorial Hotel was modest but clean. Hester found herself in a room with an actual bed, a luxury that seemed almost foreign after days on the ground. A bath was arranged, and she sank into the hot water with a groan of relief. Clean and dressed in her one good dress carefully packed for this purpose, she felt almost human again. A knock at her door revealed Martha Ellery's thoughtfulness. The widow had sent a package with Deputy Collins when he joined them, a new dress in soft blue wool, proper for town. "That woman thinks of everything," Hester murmured, running her hands over the fine fabric. Another knock interrupted her admiration. She opened the door to find Talon, transformed by clean clothes and a fresh shave. He looked younger, almost uncertain. "You clean up well," she said, trying for lightness. "So do you." His eyes traveled over her, warm with appreciation. "Beautiful." Heat rose in her cheeks. "Talon." "I know." He stepped back slightly. "Not the time, but Hester, when this is over—" "When this is over," she agreed softly, letting the promise hang between them. They met the others in the hotel dining room, over a meal that seemed impossibly rich after trail food. They discussed the morning's revelations. Water Commission could work. Collins mused. If they give it real authority. "Big if," Jed countered. "Government's good at making committees that do nothing but talk." "Not Pemberton," Reed said. "Man's got a reputation for getting things done. That's why Washington sent him out here." "What about the threat?" Hester asked. "Those men hunting us won't just give up because we delivered the maps." "No," Talon agreed. "But their payday's gone. Without Vale's money or the promise of controlling the water, most will drift to easier prey." "Most isn't all," Jed pointed out. "No, it's not." Talon's expression darkened. "There'll always be some who hold grudges." The afternoon was consumed by legal proceedings. Hester found herself recounting events again and again, each telling making them feel more distant, less real. By evening, she was exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with physical effort. She escaped to the hotel's small courtyard, needing air and solitude. The space was surprisingly peaceful, with a small fountain and desert plants creating an oasis in the busy town. She'd been there only minutes when footsteps announced company. "Mind if I sit?" Jed asked. She gestured to the bench beside her. They sat in companionable silence, watching the last light fade from the sky. "Going to take it?" she finally asked. "The commissioner position?" "Thinking about it." He rubbed his jaw, a gesture she'd learned meant deep thought. "Never saw myself as a public servant." "You've been serving the public since you stood up to Vale." "That was different. That was personal." He glanced at her. "What about you? What will you do now?" The question she'd been avoiding. "I don't know. My job's still there if I want it. But everything's different now. I'm different." She smoothed her skirts, searching for words. "For so long, all I wanted was to be safe, left alone. Now you want more. Is that foolish?" "No," Jed said firmly. "That's growth. That's living instead of just surviving." "Sounds like you're talking about yourself, too." His smile was rueful. "Maybe I am. Been hiding on that ranch a long time, telling myself I was building something. But maybe I was just hiding from the world after Tom died. Nothing wrong with needing time to heal." "No, but there comes a point where healing becomes an excuse." He stood, looking down at her with brotherly affection. "Whatever you decide, Hester, you'll always have a place at the ranch. But don't stay out of fear. Stay because it's what you want." After he left, Hester remained in the courtyard, thinking. The fountain bubbled softly, and somewhere a guitar played a lonely melody. She was so lost in thought that she didn't hear Talon approach until he spoke. "May I?" She nodded, and he sat where Jed had been, but where Jed had kept friendly distance. Talon sat close enough that she could feel his warmth in the cooling air. "Depositions done?" she asked. "Finally, lawyer wanted every detail about the mountain routes." He paused. "Governor offered me a job." Hester's heart clenched. "Oh." "Surveying the territory, mapping water sources officially, making sure the information's public." He turned to look at her. "It would mean traveling, being gone for weeks at a time." "It's good work, important." "It is." He was quiet for a moment. It would also mean having a home base, somewhere to come back to. That must be nice, having somewhere to come back to. Hester, his voice went soft. Look at me. She did, finding his dark eyes serious in the dim light. I've been drifting my whole life, he said. Never found a reason to stop, until now. Her breath caught. Talon! Let me finish, please. He took her hand, his fingers gentle but sure. I know you've been hurt. No trust doesn't come easy. But I also know that when I thought Molina might hurt you, I would have done anything to stop him. You barely know me, she whispered. I know enough. His thumb traced circles on her palm. I know you're brave when you're terrified. Kind even when the world hasn't been kind to you. Strong in ways that have nothing to do with muscle. I'm also damaged, scarred. So am I. He lifted her hand, pressing it to his chest where she could feel his heartbeat. Everyone is, in some way. Doesn't mean we don't deserve happiness. She thought about Jed's words about jumping and trusting someone to catch you. Thought about all the times Talon had already caught her physically and emotionally. I'm scared, she admitted. I know, so am I. His smile was gentle. But maybe we can be scared together. Before she could lose her nerve, Hester leaned forward and kissed him. Not the quick peck on the cheek from before, but something real and warm and full of possibility. Talon's hand came up to cup her face, holding her like something precious. When they parted, both were breathing unsteadily. So, she managed, that home base you mentioned? His smile widened. I was thinking Dust Creek. Heard there's a ranch there that might need a permanent scout, and the best cook in the territory. Permanent? If she'll have me. She might be persuaded. Hester felt herself smiling, really smiling, for the first time in memory. Though you should know she comes with conditions. Such as? No rushing, no pushing. We take things slow, build something real. I'm good at patience. Tracking teaches you that. And when you're gone surveying, then I'll come home to you. He said it simply, like it was obvious. Every trail ends somewhere. Hester, I'd like mine to end with you. She kissed him again, sealing the promise. Later, back in the hotel dining room for a late supper, their new understanding must have shown. Collins grinned knowingly. Reed blushed and stammered congratulations, and Jed simply raised his glass with a satisfied nod. 2 new beginnings, he toasted. New beginnings, they echoed. The next morning brought final meetings with the governor. The Water Commission was officially established, with Jed reluctantly accepting a position. Talon signed on as territorial surveyor, and Hester found herself with an unexpected offer. Mrs. McCrae. Governor Pemberton said, I need someone to coordinate between the commission and the communities. Someone who understands the real needs of the people, not just the politics. I'm just a cook, she protested. You're a woman who helped stop a water war with courage and intelligence, he corrected. That's exactly who I need. It would mean traveling between settlements, Talon added with poorly hidden hope. Perfect for a surveyor's wife. We're not married, Hester said, blushing. Yet, he said simply, making her blush deeper. In the end, she accepted. Not because of Talon, though his presence certainly helped, but because it felt like the next step in becoming whoever she was meant to be. The journey back to Dust Creek took 3 days. They traveled openly this time. No need for hidden trails and constant vigilance. As they created a rise and saw the ranch spread below them, Hester felt something ease in her chest. Home. When had Calter Ranch become home? Riders coming, Talon observed. A delegation was indeed approaching Martha Ellery in the lead, followed by what looked like half the town. As they drew closer, Hester could see smiles and waving hands. Welcome back, Martha called. We've been preparing a celebration. Whole town wants to thank you proper. Hester looked around at these people who'd become friends, allies, family of choice, at Jed, who'd given her sanctuary when she needed it most, a Talon who'd shown her she was worth fighting beside and for, at the wide sky and endless horizon that no longer seemed threatening but full of possibility. "Well," she said, that new smile finding her lips again, "I suppose we'd better not disappoint them." As they rode down toward home and celebration, toward a future she was finally ready to embrace, Hester McCrae marveled at the journey. She'd started as a woman running from everything. Now she was someone running toward life, love, and purpose. The scared cook who'd arrived at this ranch 2 years ago would hardly recognize the woman riding back to it. But that was the point. Wasn't it not to remain who you were, but to become who you could be? And surrounded by friends, with Talon beside her and important work ahead, Hester thought she might finally be becoming herself. The celebration would last long into the night. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new responsibilities, but tonight was for joy, for dancing, for stolen kisses in shadowed corners, and for the deep satisfaction of knowing you'd found where you belonged. As Talon helped her dismount, his hands lingering on her waist, he murmured, "No regrets." "None," she said, and meant it. "For the first time in my life, none at all." The weeks following their return transformed Dust Creek in ways both subtle and profound. The Water Commission's first act was to establish communal access points along Quail Creek, with scheduled irrigation times that gave even the smallest homesteads a fighting chance. Hester watched the changes from her kitchen window each morning, seeing hope bloom alongside the newly watered fields. "Community meeting tonight," Jed announced over breakfast, setting down a freshly printed notice. "First official gathering of the Water Commission." "You nervous?" Hester asked, refilling his coffee. "Terrified," he admitted with a wry smile. "Easier facing down gunmen than standing up in front of neighbors asking me to be fair with their lives and livelihoods." "You'll do fine," Talon assured him, entering the kitchen with an armload of surveying equipment. "People trust you because you've earned it." The scout had been coming and going regularly, mapping water sources throughout the valley. Each journey took him away for days, but he always returned to the ranch to Hester as promised. "How long this time?" she asked, trying to keep her tone light. "Just 3 days. New springs reported near Calvary Ridge." He set down his equipment and moved to her side. "I'll be back for the meeting." Their courtship, if it could be called that, had been unconventional but steady. Stolen moments between duties, long talks while she taught him to bake bread and he taught her to read weather patterns. The ranch hands had grown used to seeing them walking together in the evenings, maintaining proper distance but clearly connected by something deeper than proximity. "Speaking of the meeting," Jed said, tactfully focusing on his breakfast, "Governor sent word. Wants you to present the community liaison proposal. Hester." "Me, but I've never spoken publicly before." "You spoke up to Molina," Talon reminded her. "To Vale. To all of us when it mattered." "That was different. That was—" "Survival," Jed suggested. "This is too, just a different kind. Valley needs to see we're united, that this isn't just rancher business." Before Hester could protest further, Sam Pritchard burst through the door. "Boss, we got trouble. Widow Morrison's boy just rode in. Says there's men at their place, claiming rights to the new water schedule." The warmth of the morning evaporated. Jed was already reaching for his gun belt. "How many?" Talon asked, his surveying forgotten. Tom said 4 well-dressed city types with a paper they claim gives them priority rights. "That's impossible," Jed said. "Commission hasn't issued any priority rights." "Tell that to them," Sam replied grimly. Within minutes, a group was mounted and riding hard for the Morrison place. Hester had insisted on coming, despite protests. "This is commission business now," she'd said firmly. "I'm the liaison. I should be there." They found the Morrison ranch in uproar. 4 men in Eastern suits stood in the yard, backed by 2 hired guns who looked much more comfortable with the situation. Mrs. Morrison faced them from her porch, rifle in hand, while her sons flanked her. "That's close enough. Counter," one of the suited men called as they approached. "This is a legal matter." "Legal matters go through the commission," Jed replied evenly. "I'm the commissioner. What's your business here?" The man produced a document with a flourish. "Prescott Mining Consortium. We've purchased priority water rights from the territorial government." "The territorial government doesn't have the authority to sell what belongs to the community," Hester said, surprising herself by speaking up. The man's eyes dismissed her briefly before returning to Jed. "Perhaps you should let the menfolk handle this, Miss. Perhaps you should recognize Mrs. McCrae as the official liaison for the Water Commission," Talon said quietly, moving his horse closer to hers. "And speak with the respect due her position." The man's face flushed. "Regardless of titles, our claim is valid, signed by the territorial secretary himself." "Let me see that," Jed demanded. Reluctantly, the man handed over the document. Jed studied it, his frown deepening. "This is dated 2 weeks ago, after the commission was established." So the secretary knew he didn't have authority anymore. This paper's worthless." "We'll see what a judge says about that," another suit interjected. "In the meantime, we'll be taking our allotted water." "No, Mrs." Morrison said flatly. "You won't." The hired guns shifted, hands moving toward weapons. The ranch hands responded in kind. The air crackled with pending violence. "Wait," Hester said, an idea forming. "Mr. Prescott, James Prescott." "Mr. Prescott, you're businessmen, correct here to make a profit." "Obviously. Then perhaps we can discuss this as business people." She dismounted, ignoring Talon's worried sound. "Mrs. Morrison, might we use your parlor?" The widow studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Of course, dear." "I don't negotiate with," Prescott started. "With the official commission liaison," Hester interrupted smoothly. "The person with the governor's ear, how unfortunate for your business prospects." That got his attention. After a moment's heated whispered conference, Prescott and one companion followed Hester inside, along with Jed and Mrs. Morrison. Talon positioned himself by the door, a silent guardian. "Now," Hester said once they were seated, channeling every bit of authority she'd learned from watching strong women like Martha and Mrs. Morrison. "Let's discuss reality. Your document, even if legally valid, which it isn't, promises you something that doesn't exist." "Water exists," Prescott said coldly. "Water exists," Hester agreed, "but not in the quantities your paper claims. Have you seen the actual survey reports?" "We were told." "You were lied to." She leaned forward. "The underground stream is substantial but not infinite. The commission has calculated sustainable usage. What your paper promises would drain the aquifer within 2 years. That's not our problem." "It is if you want to make money." Jed interjected. "Dead land produces nothing. No crops mean no towns. No towns mean no market for whatever you're mining." "We could take this to federal court," Prescott threatened. "You could," Hester agreed. "Spend months, maybe years fighting, legal fees mounting. Meanwhile, no water, no profit, or, she glanced at Jed, who nodded slightly. They discussed contingencies for situations like this. "Or you could work with the commission. There's land available for purchase, with water rights attached proportional to acreage, legal, sustainable, and profitable long-term." Prescott's eyes narrowed. "You're offering us a deal." "I'm offering you a chance to be part of this community's growth instead of its enemy," Hester corrected. "The choice is yours." What followed was 2 hours of negotiation that tested every bit of patience Hester possessed. But growing up in a boarding house had taught her to read people, and desperate men were often the easiest to guide toward reason. In the end, Prescott agreed to meet with the full commission, to discuss legitimate land purchases and water allocations. The worthless document was set aside. The hired guns sent away. "Not bad for someone who's never spoken publicly," Jed murmured as they prepared to leave. "That wasn't public," Hester protested. "That was just talking sense." "Exactly what we need at tonight's meeting," he replied with a grin. The ride back was quieter, everyone processing what had nearly happened. Talon rode beside Hester, close enough to talk privately. "You handled that well," he said. "I was terrified the whole time." "Couldn't tell." He paused. "You're growing into this role." "Am I?" She considered that. "Sometimes I feel like I'm pretending to be someone else." "No, you're becoming who you always were, just louder." His smile took any sting from the words. "I like it." That evening, the town hall overflowed with people, ranchers, farmers, townspeople, even some of the Mexican families from the Southern Valley who often got overlooked. Hester sat at the commission table, trying not to fidget with her notes. Jed called the meeting to order, his natural authority serving him well. Issues were raised, water allocations discussed, grievances aired. Through it all, Hester found herself translating between groups, helping the ranchers understand the farmers' needs, explaining to townspeople why livestock needed water access too. "Mrs. McCrae," a voice called from the crowd. She recognized Ben Harper, who ran a small farm near the creek. "What about those of us who can't afford the new irrigation equipment the commission's recommending?" Hester stood, her nervousness fading as she focused on the real need in Ben's voice. "That's an excellent question. Mr. Harper, we're proposing a cooperative fund. Those who can afford equipment purchase it for communal use. Everyone contributes what they can money, labor or goods. Everyone benefits." "Sounds like charity," someone muttered. "Sounds like neighbors helping neighbors." "Mrs." Morrison countered firmly. "The way it should be." Discussion continued. Sometimes heated but never violent. Progress, Hester thought. Real progress. Near the meeting's end, a late arrival caused a stir. Sheriff Cole entered, looking grim, followed by a young woman Hester didn't recognize. "Sorry to interrupt," the sheriff said. "This is Miss Sarah Vale, Silas Vale's daughter." The hall went silent. Hester felt Talon tense beside her. Sarah Vale was perhaps 25, with her father's sharp features softened by what appeared to be genuine distress. I need to speak to the commission." Jed gestured her forward. "You have the floor, Miss Vale." "I've come to make amends," she said, voice steady despite the hostile atmosphere. "My father did terrible things. I want to help fix the damage." "How?" someone called out. Sarah reached into her bag, producing a leather folder. "These are the real deeds and contracts my father hid. Proof that several families he drove out actually owned their land free and clear. And—" She hesitated, then continued. "Records of bribes paid to various officials, evidence that could reverse dozens of illegal foreclosures." The explosion of voices was deafening. Jed had to pound the gavel repeatedly to restore order. "Why?" Hester found herself asking when quiet returned. "Why come forward now?" Sarah met her eyes. "Because I've spent 6 months watching communities downstream suffer from my father's greed. Because I'm tired of being ashamed of my name. Because it's the right thing to do." "Could be a trick," Talon said quietly. But Hester heard the uncertainty in his voice. "The documents can be verified," Sarah said. "I'm placing them all in the commission's hands. I don't want anything except the chance to stay here, to work, to prove I'm not my father." The debate that followed was intense, but shorter than expected. In the end, it was Martha Ellery who swayed the crowd. "Sins of the father shouldn't curse the child forever," she said firmly. "We've all made mistakes or benefited from others. What matters is what we do now." Sarah Vale was allowed to stay, her documents accepted for verification. As the meeting concluded, Hester found herself approached by the young woman. "Thank you," Sarah said quietly, For asking why instead of just condemning. Everyone deserves a chance to choose who they'll be, Hester replied, thinking of her own journey. As the hall emptied, the commission members gathered to debrief. The night had brought challenges, but also solutions. Conflict, but also unity. Not bad for our first official meeting, Jed said, relief evident in his voice. You did well. Hester told him, you all did. We, Talon corrected. We all did. This doesn't work without everyone. Outside, the night was clear. Stars brilliant in the desert sky. People lingered, talking in small groups, planning cooperative ventures. The sound of laughter drifted from somewhere. Walk with me, Talon asked Hester. They strolled toward the creek, now flowing steadily thanks to the new management. The sound of water over stones was musical in the quiet night. 3 days, he said eventually. Then back for a week. Then probably gone again. I know. She'd been thinking about their arrangement, the constant departures and returns. It's all right. Is it? She stopped, turning to face him. Talon, I spent years with a man who never left and made every day miserable. Having you gone sometimes, but coming home happy to see me, that's not a hardship. That's a gift. He reached for her hand. What if there was another way? What do you mean? The survey work. A lot of it is documenting what communities are doing with their water access, recording success stories, noting problems. Easier to do with someone who understands the people, not just the land. Are you asking me to come with you? Sometimes? When you can, when you want. He squeezed her hand. Partners in all things. Partners, she repeated, tasting the word. I like that. They were quiet for a while, listening to the water and the distant voices. Then Talon spoke again. Softer. Hester, I need to ask you something. Something in his tone made her heart race. Yes. The kitchen at the ranch, do you want to keep running it, or would you rather focus on the commission work? She blinked, not having expected that question. Both. I love cooking, feeding people, but I also love this new work, helping solve problems. Then we'll make that happen. Hire help for when you're traveling or busy with commission business. He turned to face her fully. I want you to have everything you want. Hester, not have to choose between parts of yourself. That's not what you were going to ask, she said softly. No, he admitted. But the other question can wait until you're ready to hear it. She knew what question waited unspoken, could feel it in the way he looked at her, in the careful distance he maintained despite their growing closeness. Marriage. Partnership in law as well as deed. Soon, she promised. Not tonight, but soon. He lifted her hand to his lips, a courtly gesture that made her heart flutter. I'm good at waiting, remember? They walked back to find Jed organizing rides home for those who'd traveled far. Sarah Vale stood alone near the hall, uncertainty clear in her posture. Miss Vale, Hester called. Do you have accommodations? No, I thought the hotel, but... Martha Ellery has rooms, Hester said, catching the widow's eye. Martha nodded, understanding immediately. She'll take good care of you. Gratitude flashed across Sarah's face. Thank you, again. As they prepared to leave, Sheriff Cole approached the group. Wanted to let you know got word from Cedar Ridge. That marshal, Coltrane, turned himself in. Says he wants to testify about everyone who bribed him over the years. Rats fleeing the ship. Jed muttered, maybe, or maybe seeing justice done here inspired him. The sheriff tipped his hat. Either way, thought you should know. Changes are spreading beyond Dust Creek. The ride back to the ranch was peaceful, everyone lost in their own thoughts. Hester rode between Jed and Talon, feeling the solid presence of these men who'd become family. Back home, she returned to her kitchen, needing the familiar ritual of preparing for tomorrow's breakfast, but it felt different now. Not a refuge from the world, but a base from which to engage it. Talon appeared in the doorway as she was banking the fire for the night. Hester. That question I didn't ask? When you're ready, just let me know. She turned to him, seeing patience and love and promise in his dark eyes. What if I said I was ready now? His breath caught. Are you? She considered. The fear was still there. Might always be there. But it was small now. Manageable. Overwhelmed by possibility, by hope, by the simple joy of choosing her own path. Ask me, she said. He moved closer, taking her hands. Hester McCrae, will you marry me? Not because you need protection or security, but because I love you and want to build a life together. Yes, she said, surprised by how easy the word came. Yes, I will. His smile was radiant as he pulled her into his arms. The kiss that followed was sweet with promise, warm with certainty. When? He asked when they parted. After your next survey trip, give me time to arrange things, she smiled. Besides, if we're going to be partners in everything, I should probably learn to read those maps of yours. I'll teach you, he promised. Everything I know. And I'll teach you my mother's recipe for wedding cake, she countered. They laughed, the sound filling the kitchen that had seen so much fear and was now witness to joy. Outside, Dust Creek flowed steadily, its water bringing life to the valley. Change was flowing too, reshaping the land and its people in ways both seen and unseen. And at the heart of it, two people who'd found each other across miles and years of running, finally ready to stand still together. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. There would be disputes to settle, water to allocate, communities to unite. Sarah Vale's documents would need investigating. The Prescott Mining Consortium would need watching. But tonight, in a kitchen that smelled of bread and hope, Hester McCrae, soon to be something new, stood in the arms of the man she loved and felt the world shift into place. No regrets, Talon asked, echoing their earlier conversation. None, she assured him. Only anticipation. And in that moment, with the future spreading before them like an unmapped trail, that was more than enough. It was everything. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and bright, with a breeze that carried the scent of sage and new beginnings. Hester stood before the small mirror in her room, hardly recognizing the woman who looked back, Martha Ellery and Mrs. Morrison fussed with her dress, a simple but elegant creation of cream-colored silk that Sarah Vale had surprisingly contributed to. Never thought I'd see the day, Martha said, pinning a spray of desert wildflowers in Hester's hair. You've come so far, dear. We all have, Hester replied, thinking of how much had changed in just 3 months since that first commission meeting. The water cooperative had flourished beyond anyone's expectations. Sarah Vale's documents had led to the return of lands to their rightful owners and the prosecution of several corrupt officials. The young woman herself had proven invaluable, using her education and connections to help secure fair prices for local goods in eastern markets. Ready, Mrs.? Morrison asked gently. Hester took a deep breath. Yes. The ceremony was held by Quail Creek, under the cottonwoods that now flourished with regular water. It seemed fitting the place that had been at the center of so much conflict now witnessing joy. The gathering was larger than expected. Beyond the ranch family and town friends, people had come from throughout the valley, the Mexican families from the south, the small farmers, even some Apache traders Talon had befriended during his surveys. It was, Hester realized, a testament to the community they'd all helped build. Talon waited by the creek, dressed in his best clothes, but still somehow looking like he belonged to the wild places. His face when he saw her was worth every moment of fear she'd overcome to reach this point. Jed stood as Talon's best man, while young Eddie Marsh had ridden in specially to witness. Sheriff Cole had gotten himself ordained just for the occasion, claiming it was about time Dust Creek had someone official for such matters. Dearly beloved, Cole began, his usually gruff voice gentle. We gather here by the waters that sustain us, under the sky that shelters us, to witness something precious, two people choosing to face life together. The ceremony was simple, the vows heartfelt. When Talon spoke of finding home not in a place, but in a person, Hester's eyes misted. When she promised to be his partner in all things mapping both land and life, his hand tightened on hers. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," Cole declared, "and may God help anyone who tries to come between them." Laughter rippled through the gathering as Talon kissed his bride, sweet and sure. The celebration that followed filled the ranch with music and laughter. Tables groaned under the weight of food. Everyone had contributed something. The Apache traders offered dried venison and berries. The Mexican families brought spiced beans and tortillas. The farmers their best preserves and fresh bread. "It's like the whole valley is here," Hester marveled to Talon as they took a brief break from dancing. "It is the whole valley," he corrected. "Your valley now, our valley." As evening approached, Jed called for attention, raising his glass. "To Hester and Talon," he began, "who showed us that courage comes in many forms and that the strongest partnerships are built on respect and choice." "Here, here," the crowd echoed. Other toasts followed. Sam Pritchard told embarrassing stories about teaching Talon to dance. Martha Ellery reminded everyone of Hester's first week at the ranch. Too scared to leave the kitchen. Even Sarah Vale spoke, thanking them for showing her that redemption was possible. As the sun set, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, Hester found herself standing with Talon at the edge of the celebration, looking out over the valley. "Any regrets?" he asked, their private joke now. "Only one," she said, making him look at her in concern. "I wish we'd done this sooner." His laughter was warm as he pulled her close. "We have time now, all the time we need." Speaking of time, Jed approached with a paper in hand. "Sorry to interrupt, but this came from the governor. Thought you'd want to see it tonight." Hester read quickly, her eyes widening. "They approved it, the educational program for water management. They want us to travel to other territories, teach communities how to organize like we did." "Both of you," Jed clarified. "Official appointment as territorial advisors. We could help prevent wars before they start." Talon said slowly, "Show people there's another way." "When would we start?" Hester asked. "Spring, according to this. Gives you time to settle in, maybe train someone to help with the kitchen duties when you're gone." Jed smiled. "Congratulations to both of you." As he walked away, Hester and Talon stood in silence, absorbing this new development. "It's a big responsibility," she said finally. "We're ready for it." He turned her to face him. "Together, we're ready for anything." The party continued late into the night, but eventually, the newlyweds slipped away to the small cabin Talon had built near the main house. It was modest but well-crafted, with windows facing both the sunrise and sunset. "Welcome home, Mrs. McCrae," Talon said as he carried her over the threshold. "I thought we agreed on both names," she laughed. "McCrae Talon, or Talon McCrae. We never did decide the order." "We have time to figure it out," he said, setting her down gently. "We have time for everything now." The next morning brought normalcy with a difference. Hester still rose early to start breakfast, but now Talon was beside her, helping with practiced ease. The kitchen that had once been her solitary refuge was now shared space, richer for it. "Letter for you, Hester," Eddie Marsh called, having stayed overnight. "From Fort Union." She recognized the handwriting immediately. Thomas Marsh, Eddie's uncle who'd recovered from his wounds. "Dear Mrs. McCrae," she read aloud. "Or should I say Mrs. Talon, congratulations on your marriage. Eddie tells me the ceremony was beautiful. I wanted to thank you again for saving my life that night. Because of your courage and skill, I'm alive to see my own daughter married next month. The map we carried has led to prosperity for many, but I believe the real treasure was the community that formed to protect it. May you and your husband know nothing but happiness." "That's lovely," Talon said, reading over her shoulder. It's more than that, Hester realized. It's proof that what we do matters. Every choice, every act of courage, ripples outward. The weeks that followed settled into a rhythm. Hester balanced her kitchen duties with commission work, training a young woman named Beth to help with cooking. Talon continued his surveys, but now took Hester with him on shorter trips, teaching her to read the land as he did. On one such trip, camping under stars so bright they seemed touchable, Hester asked him about his mother's people and their mapping traditions. They believed water was sacred, he explained, tracing patterns in the dirt. Not to be owned, but to be honored. Every source had a story, a purpose. Maps weren't just about location, but about relationship. Is that why you were so determined to keep the information public? Partly. Also because I'd seen what happens when one group controls water. People suffer. Land dies. He looked at her across the small fire. But mostly because it was right. Sometimes that's enough. Do you think your mother would have approved of me? Talon's smile was soft. She would have loved you, would have seen your strength right away, probably before you saw it yourself. I wish I could have met her. You carry part of her with you, he said, touching the small charm still pinned to her collar. And through you, her wisdom continues. When spring arrived, they were ready for their new roles. The territorial advisory position would take them across the Southwest, helping communities establish water cooperatives and resolve conflicts before they turned violent. Their last night before the first journey, the whole town gathered again at the ranch. It had become tradition now, the community coming together to mark important moments. You'll write, Martha demanded, pressing a packet of letters into Hester's hands. Tell us everything about these places you're visiting. Of course, Hester promised. And we'll be back between assignments. This is still home. Always will be, Jed added. Your cabin will be waiting, and there'll always be work here if you want it. Sarah Vale approached hesitantly. She'd integrated well into the community, using her business acumen to help local producers, but still carried herself with careful uncertainty. I wanted to thank you, she said quietly, for taking a chance on me, for showing me that the past doesn't have to define the future. We all deserve the chance to choose who we become, Hester replied, embracing the younger woman. You chose well. As the evening wound down, Sheriff Cole pulled Talon and Hester aside. Got word from the Rangers. That tracker, Molina, he's been spreading word about what happened here, about the lady who faced him down with nothing but nerve and medical supplies. Is that good or bad? Talon asked, instinctively protective. Good. I think he's telling others in his line of work that Dust Creek is protected, that we stand together. Cole grinned. Called you the healer with steel in her spine. Meant as a compliment, I believe. Hester wasn't sure whether to be flattered or worried. Will it cause problems? Opposite. I expect reputation like that keeps trouble away. Cole tipped his hat. Travel safe, both of you. We'll keep things running smooth here. That night, in their cabin, Hester and Talon packed the last of their supplies. Maps, medical kit, educational materials, and copies of the cooperative agreements that had worked so well in Dust Creek. Nervous? Talon asked, watching her carefully fold her good dress. Excited, she corrected. A year ago, I couldn't imagine leaving the ranch. Now I can't wait to see what's out there. That's my brave wife, he said, pulling her close. Partners, she reminded him, in all things. In all things, he agreed. The next morning dawned bright and clear. Their wagon was loaded, horses ready, goodbyes said. As they drove away from Calter Ranch, Hester looked back once at the place that had given her sanctuary when she needed it most. We'll be back, Talon assured her, understanding her momentary sadness. I know, it's just, this is where I became myself, where I learned to be strong. No, he corrected gently. This is where you learned you were already strong. The strength was always yours. As they crested the rise that would take them out of sight of the ranch, Hester saw riders approaching from the east. For a moment, old fear flickered, but then she recognized them. The Apache traders who'd come to their wedding, ready to guide them through the first leg of their journey. "Told you water mapping was about relationships," Talon said with a smile. As they rode on, joining their guides, Hester thought about the journey that had brought her here. From a terrified woman hiding in a kitchen to someone ready to help reshape the territory's future. The scars Dawson had left physical and emotional were still there, but they no longer defined her. She'd learned that survival was just the first step. The real victory was in choosing to truly live. The road ahead stretched long and uncertain. There would be challenges, conflicts, communities resistant to change. But there would also be successes, friendships forged, problems solved. And through it all, she wouldn't be alone. "Penny, for your thoughts," Talon said, echoing her old question to Jed. "Just thinking about water," she said. "Oh, how it always finds a way, blocked in one place. It flows around, seeming to disappear only to emerge stronger somewhere else." She smiled at him. "Like hope, like love." "Like you," he said softly, as they rode into the rising sun, toward whatever adventures awaited. Hester McCrae Talon knew with bone-deep certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. Not just in a place, but in a life she'd chosen, with a partner she trusted, doing work that mattered. Behind them, Quail Creek continued its steady flow, bringing life to the valley. The community they'd helped forge grew stronger each day, bound by shared struggle and mutual aid. And somewhere in a territorial office, plans were being made based on the Dust Creek model, proof that one small victory could inspire larger change. But all of that was backdrop to the simple truth of two people who'd found each other across years of pain and learned that the greatest courage was in choosing to trust, to love, to build something together. The desert stretched vast and challenging before them, but Hester no longer saw emptiness. She saw possibility. And with Talon beside her, their horses' hooves beating a steady rhythm on the hard-packed earth. She rode toward that possibility with a heart full of purpose and a spirit finally, truly free. The end of one journey, the beginning of everything else. Thank you so much for listening to this story. Dear listeners, I hope Hester and Talon's journey touched your heart as much as it touched mine. I'd love to hear where you're listening from. Please leave a comment below and share your thoughts about their adventure. If you enjoyed this tale from the Old West, please subscribe to Wild West Night for more stories of courage, redemption, and love against the backdrop of the American frontier. Don't forget to like this video and hit that hype button to help more people discover these stories. Until next time, partners, keep riding toward your own horizons. Happy trails.